All right, so here I am in Dallas, Texas, with Mr. Aronra. How you doing?
All right.
And his wife, right? I am on a spring break trip to Texas, and I figured I would ask some questions to Mr. Aronra, everything. So certainly, my first question is, could a God exist, do you think? Is it, I mean, have you ruled that out as a possibility?
Yes. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that what is a God? Before you can decide whether or not it can exist, you have to know what you're talking about. And the only way to classify, categorize any collective is to assemble all the characters that are held in common by every member universally accepted in that set, and to determine whether some new addition actually belongs there or not. So you can't omit gods that have been worshipped by millions of people for thousands of years simply because they don't fit your current description of what you want to worship today. So the definition of your God has to also apply to Apollo and Dionysus and Krishna and all of that. So when you look at what traits they all share in common, you get that a god is a magical, anthropomorphic, immortal. An immortal can't exist. Magic doesn't exist. And the idea that the universe was created by an evolved ape is a little bit preposterous, because we are, as humans, anthropomorphic. It means that you have some derivative from evolved apes. So the creator of the universe was somehow an evolved ape using magic spells. It would be hard to come up with something less possible than a god. Then the definition gets even worse, because the most current definitions of God have him defined by his miraculous nature. Miracles are defined as that which cannot be explained by science, not just now, but ever, right? So it is in defiance of physical laws, which translates as physically impossible. And another definition of God would say that he exists outside this reality, which means, of course, that he does not exist in reality. So
you got a problem there.
Yeah, so there's several ways in which God is not a possibility.
I had a friend back home who was an atheist, and I remember earlier we were talking about September 11th, and we were talking about how certain people may think that there's virgins waiting for them in a heaven if they commit an act of violence. And he used to say that they don't even get a chance to be disappointed, you know, because him as an atheist, he believes when you die, you die. My question is, do you ever wish that they could be disappointed? Say say there is some afterlife, and maybe they at least realize that what they were expecting is not there.
I have many times lamented that when somebody tells me when I die, then I'll know the truth. And my response, of course, is that, well, when either of us dies, neither of us will know anything. And that the unfortunate thing is there will never be an I told you so moment, because that person really will not even have a chance to be disappointed. I've said that myself many times. Your delusion follows you right up until your brain stops working.
Do you ever find, for the term pissing contest, which is when like two children are fighting over something, or like when someone doesn't want to admit that they're wrong, and even when it's clear that they're wrong, they still don't want to admit it and they rationalize it. Do you ever think that that's what someone's religious belief is, especially when people argue profusely, and when you present facts and they don't want to admit it, or they I guess make excuses around it? Do you think it's more about them being right than about what the facts are?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have people who inquire because they want to understand, and then you have people who assume because they think they already do, or they don't care if they already do or not. They're going to believe what they want to believe, and a lot of these people think that if you believe hard enough, that you can somehow change reality. Or if you can't change reality, it wouldn't matter, because if you convince yourself deeply enough that at least you're convinced that the reality has changed, and that's good enough for you. Religion is pretend. It is literally make-believe.
Did you ever deal personally with either a fear of hell or of being punished? Like some people, when they give up their religious beliefs, they fear that they're going to be punished in their fate. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be some consequence.
If I give up a religious belief, how could I be concerned about the aspects of the belief I no longer believe in? I haven't been concerned about hell since I was 12 years old and I damned myself. I tried to read the Bible and I didn't get much through Genesis before I threw the book across the room in disgust. And I remember offering up a out loud spoken prayer within the confines of my room, just like it says to do in Matthew. I told God that he needed to account for himself, that he either needed to explain or justify the heinous atrocities attributed to him in the Bible, or he needed to distance himself from that so that I could understand that this Bible is not talking about him. Because everything that God was supposed to be is not the atrocious monster in that repugnant tome. Now, I made that prayer in all sincerity as a 12-year-old boy, knowing full well what it meant. I told God that if he did not explain himself, and if the Bible was really true and that that's what he is, what the Bible describes, then he could not have my soul. I thought maybe my soul would matter to him. And so I put it on the chopping block. And at that moment I expected that I was going to be damned. But I really didn't see there being much of a difference, because if God was the way the Bible describes it, you're literally damned if you do or damned if you don't. I mean, you are either going to be tortured by some demonic despot for all eternity, or you're going to be locked in a room with it having to praise it for all of eternity. What's the difference?
That is a good point. When we talk about the future, sometimes it seems that it's getting better, and sometimes it seems it's getting worse. Like, what I mean is, like, obviously as time goes by, it does seem like there are more critical thinkers, even in religious communities. But however, in countries like maybe Iran and Pakistan and countries like that, we still have millions of people that continue to, raise their children in very intolerant, narrow-minded, potentially dangerous ways, dangerous beliefs. What do you think overall about the future? Is it getting better or worse?
Well, the demographic is currently, not just in the United States, but worldwide, where religion is in a general state of decline in most places. You have a polarization going on, at least in this country. You have people that are abandoning religion. They are declaring themselves not affiliated with a religion, or they're coming out as atheists and even anti-theists. But at the same time, the population of believers, which are still the minority, are polarizing. Where it used to be that everybody had some sort of a faith-based belief. They all had some kind of religion that they belonged to, but they understood that you don't mix religion with politics, and that everybody needs to understand science for practical reasons. That was the middle of the road back in the 1940s, say, for the United States. And since then, that middle-of-the-road perspective has disappeared. People that understand science now are abandoning religion entirely, and the people who embrace faith are rejecting epistemology as a whole. The percentage of believers who are creationists is actually on the rise. So it's now about 46%. That's almost half the country, and it is more than half of the remaining believers. So what you have is, as I said, it's a polarization of people that have absolutely no religion at all and people that have no sense at all. And that's not a situation that is a healthy one for this country to be in. Take also into account that they are still the majority. They own everything. They rule everything. They are heavily financed. They are corrupt, and they have no compunction. Promoting the belief, I think they have a phrase that says the end justifies the means. and that right, or that might makes right. I heard both of these quite a lot when I was growing up.
When we think about the Bible, I'm sure you've heard, and I've heard many people, they'll say that they do the right thing or they do whatever because it's in the Bible. And this, obviously, since, as what we talked on the phone, we talked about some of the crazy things in the Bible. Like, for example, when people say they're waiting to have sex until marriage, do you agree that they'll say that's because it says it in the Bible? But we have to wonder how they came to that conclusion, because the Bible, like, would you agree the Bible doesn't really say that? And especially with all the crazy things, and like, did they skip over the crazy things in the Bible?
Let's see, if you grab some girl on the sidewalk and you rape her right there, and she turns out not to already be somebody else's wife, she's yours. You've ruined it. They have a rule that if you pop it, you buy it. But you have to pay the father 50 shekels, and she has to live with you as your wife forever. This is the justice of a all-knowing, ultimately wise, infinitely just, righteous God. Does that make any sense at all?
No, it does not.
It is really hard to. It's really hard for a man to fornicate when you can have hundreds of wives and hundreds of concubines, and you can sleep with your slaves and your wife's slaves just to piss her off, because your wife is your property too. And if your brother lives in the same piece of property as you do, then when you die, she belongs to him.
She doesn't have to wait for you for the afterlife?
The Bible, they say that the Bible defines marriage as one man and one woman. No, it does not. It's one man and whatever else he can afford to keep in his house. That's pretty much the way the Bible defines marriage.
It confuses me, because I wonder, like, how they, sometimes people will say, oh, I do the right thing because of the Bible. Like, obviously
where I would challenge, and I do. I mean,
do you agree that people say that, at least?
Oh, yeah. They do say that. But every time it comes up, I have to counter them on it, because the Bible nowhere says that it matters how good or bad you are. If it mattered how good or bad you were, then a good person would get into heaven regardless whether or not he believed in the mythology that they're putting on him, right?
All right.
Nope. All sins will be forgiven as long as you believe. And if you don't believe, then all your good works are like filthy rags.
Right, filthy rags. I remember that.
There's the only criteria for redemption is gullibility. There is no good or bad. God literally does not give a damn.
So,
how good you are.
If there was a God and if there was an afterlife, how should someone be judged? I mean, because now we both have Christian backgrounds, and we've both heard the, like what you said, your works don't matter. It's just about your faith. It's just about your belief. And I would agree that that's a pretty poor way to be judged. I'm sure if Steve Jobs sat around and had faith in Jesus, he might not have invented the apple. But how should someone be judged?
Imagine being sent into a room as a child. You have one choice to make, assorted items perhaps, or the answer to a question. It doesn't really matter what the test is. You're given one test. It doesn't matter how simple or complex, but it's one test. It doesn't take long. You make that one choice, and then you're judged on that forever to the infinite extreme. So that if you make the right choice, then you get the 72 virgins, you get the Maserati, you get the mansion, you get the 9 people that are waiting on your hand and foot every minute of every day, so you don't ever have to do anything, and everybody's always praising you how wonderful you are. That's what happens if you make the right choice. And the wrong choice means that you're trapped on a belt sander for your remaining years as you are slowly grinded to death. This is the kind of extremes, the stick and the carrot that religion offers. It makes absolutely no sense to judge someone for eternity over a single life. Now, if you want to have something that it would be just or righteous in a judgment against somebody, then you should have something where you have an increasing amount of knowledge. And what good is it to judge someone if they can't be redeemed? If you can't learn from your mistakes, if you can't improve, there's no purpose in it. The only reason that religion puts this out to people is because belief is all that matters. You have to buy their nonsense and keep paying their tithe, or else they're going to have to get regular jobs, and then they won't have all the political clout that they currently enjoy, and that's what this is really all about.
Do you think Christian nations are more tolerant of atheism than other nations? Maybe more, so like, obviously we'd agree that America is more tolerant than Saudi Arabia, but do you think overall Christian nations are more tolerant of atheism?
I would have to say that in the current environment, the predominantly Christian nations are more tolerant of atheists than the stereotypical Muslim countries are. But you don't have to go back very far in time to see that there was no difference then, because it's very often the case that atheists have been, hung or burned or whatever. Even people within the clergy, when their beliefs don't quite match up with the status quo, what's the response always?
Yeah, heretic, right.
Right. You take Bruno, for example, who is he doesn't qualify as an atheist, but he's a heretic. Why is he a heretic? Well, because he has original ideas. We can't have that, so we set him on fire.
Without an afterlife, and without there being judgment, punishment, and reward, do you ever think someone could get away with, like say someone commits a crime and they don't get caught, even something as serious as murder, without there being an observer and without there being an afterlife, could they in a sense get away with it, and does that matter?
It bothers me that people get away with it, as you said. But as I said, the God of the Bible, at least, doesn't care. And really, none of them do. I mean, the Abrahamic God only cares that you buy into the belief system. You have required beliefs and prohibited beliefs, and you had better toe the party line and toe it precisely, because any deviation from that is considered heresy, and heresy itself is a crime which they would consider equal in punishment status to murder. So believing differently than what you're told to believe is as bad as any crime you could commit. Now, in the Indian traditions, in the Eastern religions like Hindu, you have, their gods don't care about the right or wrong thing either. They also are all about belief. But you have this other aspect called karma. At least karma inflicts some idea where you're generating negative energies or positive responses. These things can provide some sense of justice while we live, but the gods don't.
The possibility of there being an afterlife, does it ever sound appealing? Like, for example, the only time it really sounds appealing with me is when someone passes away and maybe they were younger, or maybe it was before their time, or when we deal with a sad loss. Does that ever, do you ever think maybe the possibility of there being a heaven that they can continue on,
Okay, in science, you cannot say that something is until you have evidence to show that it is. And it has to be an overwhelming preponderance if you're going to state it as fact. You have to have multiple lines of evidence that indicate that this is the case.
And peer review and all that, right?
If you want to say that something probably is, you have to have sufficient ground to show that that probability actually exists, right? Now, when you say possibility, well, then we have to have a precedent or a parallel that indicates that. We have to have a hypothesis that shows how this could be possible. What you're talking about doesn't just defy the laws of physics. The possibility, as you put it, of an afterlife defies logic as well. Because we know how subject we are to our chemistry. We know what a severe brain trauma will do to our personalities. We know how chemical enhancements and addiction to drugs and medications and so on can affect who we are. So we know that if you were detached from what you can't be detached from the brain that generates you. You are the summation of those generations. It's not like, you know, you can take your knowledge, your memories, and your personality, and you copy it out onto a floppy disk and put it into something else, and it would act exactly the same. You are your body. There is no way to extricate you. It's not like you're a passenger in a car and you can go switch vehicles.